I checked my bank account after my stroke and discovered my own daughter stole everything. 3 weeks had passed since the ambulance came. 3 weeks since I'd collapsed in my kitchen, coffee mug still in hand, the left side of my face doing something it shouldn't. Mild stroke, the doctor said. Lucky, they said. Could have been worse. I'm Stan Kowalski, 73 years old. Spent 40 years in the steel mills here in Pittsburgh before they pensioned me out. I live alone now, since Margaret passed 3 years ago. The stroke didn't kill me, but it changed something. You know that feeling? When you wake up and everything looks the same, but you know in your bones that something shifted forever? My daughter Denise had been handling everything. She's a nurse practitioner, knows the medical system, knows what I need. Stayed at the house those first 2 weeks, managed my medications, drove me to follow-ups, answered calls from concerned neighbors. I was grateful. What father wouldn't be? But that morning, sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, I felt clear-headed for the first time in weeks. The fog had lifted, and with clarity came responsibility. I hadn't checked my finances in months. My eyesight had been going. Nothing dramatic, just that slow fade that makes reading small print a frustration instead of a habit. Bills got paid automatically. Pension checks deposited themselves. Denise said she'd taken care of everything while I recovered, and I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? Before you go further, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I need to know people are hearing this. Drop a comment too. Tell me where you're watching from, what time it is where you are. Sometimes a man just needs to know he's not talking to himself. I pulled my laptop across the table. The screen was smudged. I'd never been good at keeping technology clean. Logged into my bank's website. The loading wheel spun. I sipped my coffee. It was routine, just checking the numbers like I'd done 1,000 times before. The page loaded, and I stared. Something wasn't right. The balance sat there in black numbers against the white screen, but my brain couldn't process it. Not immediately. It's like when you expect to see your face in the mirror and see a stranger instead. That split second of disconnection before reality crashes in. I set the coffee down slowly, carefully. My hands had started shaking, just a little. Maybe leftovers from the stroke. Maybe something else. 40 years I'd worked those mills. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week. Overtime whenever they offered it because Margaret and I had plans. Retirement plans. Security plans. The kind of future you build with sacrifice and sweat and missed family dinners. This wasn't the number I remembered. Not even close. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks again, wondering if maybe the stroke had done more damage than the doctors thought, wondering if this was the beginning of something worse. Confusion, memory loss, the slow fade my father went through before he died. But the number didn't change. And somewhere in my chest, something cold and heavy began to settle. I reached for the mouse, preparing to dig deeper into the statements, when I noticed something else. Something that made my coffee taste like ashes in my mouth. Recent activity. Transactions I didn't recognize. And I realized my morning was about to get much, much worse. 40 years of 12-hour shifts, and the balance showed $14,000. $14,237. To be exact. I refreshed the page. Sometimes computers freeze, show old data, glitch in ways that make your heart stop until everything corrects itself. I'd seen it before. The number didn't change. I refreshed again. Still there. 14,237. My mouth went dry. That couldn't be right. Last time I'd really looked, maybe 6 months ago before my eyesight got bad enough that I'd stopped checking. The balance had been around 340,000. Not exact, but close. 40 years at the mill. All those overtime shifts. The bonus Margaret and I never spent because we were saving it. Her life insurance payout after the cancer took her. Money I couldn't touch because it felt like spending her memory. $340,000. Now 14. My pension deposits were showing up correctly. Every month. Like clockwork. The money came in. The government doesn't forget. But everything else. I scrolled down to the transaction history and my stomach dropped. Wire transfer, $8,500. Date, 2 months ago. Withdrawal, $12,000. Date, 6 weeks ago. Wire transfer, $25,000. Date, 3 months ago. Another, $15,000. Another, $9,200. The list went on and on. Each line another piece of my life disappearing into accounts I didn't recognize. Reference numbers that meant nothing. Transaction codes I'd never authorized. My hands are shaking worse now. Not the stroke. This was different. This was the kind of shaking that comes when your brain is trying to reject what your eyes are seeing. I clicked on one of the wire transfers, hoping for details, an explanation, something that would make this make sense. Maybe I'd authorized something and forgotten. Maybe the hospital bills were bigger than I thought. Maybe the details loaded. Authorized by Denise Kowalski. I stared at my daughter's name on the screen. Then I checked another transaction. Same name. Another. Same. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loud against the linoleum. I stood up, sat down. I stood up again. My chest felt tight, but not like the stroke. This was panic or rage, or something I didn't have a word for yet. There had to be an explanation. Denise was a nurse practitioner and made decent money. She'd been helping me. She wouldn't. I sat back down, forced myself to breathe slowly like the rehab therapist taught me, and clicked through more transactions. Checks, written on my account, made out to cash. Amounts I'd never authorized. $3,500, $4,200, $6,800, all bearing my signature, or something close enough to it that the bank hadn't questioned them. ATM withdrawals in Erie. I hadn't been to Erie in 5 years. Withdrawals in Harrisburg. Never been there in my life. Each transaction was dated, time-stamped, documented, professional, systematic. Not mistakes, not accidents. Someone had been robbing me blind, and every authorized transaction I could see had one name attached to it. My daughter's. I sat there in my kitchen, the morning sun coming through the window, like nothing was wrong, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways, and tried to understand how deep this went. I needed to go back further. I needed to see when this started. I needed to know the full truth, even if it destroyed me. I made a list, like I used to track production quotas at the mill, except this time I was counting how my daughter destroyed me. 4 hours. That's how long I sat at that kitchen table, scrolling through 5 years of bank statements, writing everything down in a spiral notebook. My handwriting got shakier as the morning wore on, but the numbers stayed clear. Numbers don't lie. They don't make excuses. They just sit there and tell you the truth whether you want to hear it or not. At the mill, I'd kept production ledgers, tons of steel processed, hours logged, efficiency ratings. The foreman trusted my numbers because I was meticulous, careful. Now I was using those same skills to document my own daughter's betrayal. The pattern emerged slowly, like a picture developing in a dark room. 5 years ago, small withdrawals, 500 here, 1,000 there. Easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. And I wasn't. My eyes were already starting to go, and Margaret was sick. We had other things to worry about. 4 years ago, the amounts increased. 2,000, 3,000. Still irregular enough that they could blend into normal spending if you weren't paying attention. 3 years ago, Margaret died in March. By May, the withdrawals had doubled. Wire transfers started appearing. Large ones, 10,000, 15,000, 25,000 at a time. I stopped writing and stared at that timeline. 3 months after I buried my wife, while I was still sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't bear to use our bed, Denise had increased her theft. She'd exploited my grief. I went back to the ledger. Keep writing. Wire transfers to D. Kowalski over the past 3 years. $127,000. I added it up twice to make sure. Same number both times. Forged checks. And they had to be forged, because I never wrote them, totaling $48,000. The memo lines said things like home repairs and medical equipment and emergency expenses. None of it is real. All of it is theft. ATM withdrawals in cities I'd never visited. Erie, Harrisburg, State College, even Cleveland once. Small amounts, usually $300 or $500, but frequent. Someone used my card, punching in my PIN, taking my money while I sat at home thinking my daughter was taking care of me. I tallied everything 3 times, checked my math like I used to check tonnage calculations. Total theft, approximately $320,000. $320,000. I set the pen down. I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe. That money represented every sacrifice Margaret and I made, every vacation we postponed, every restaurant dinner we skipped, every maybe next year we said to ourselves while we saved for the future, and it was gone. Then I remembered something that made my stomach turn over again. The power of attorney. 5 years ago, Denise had asked me to sign papers, just in case. She'd said, if something happens and you can't make decisions, someone needs to be able to handle your affairs. It's what responsible adults do, Dad. It's for emergencies only. I'd signed them. Why wouldn't I? She was my daughter, a medical professional. She knew about these things, and she was right. Someone should be able to step in if I ended up incapacitated. I pushed away from the table and walked to my filing cabinet, the one in the spare bedroom where I kept important documents. It took me 10 minutes to find the folder. Durable power of attorney, financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, my signature on all of them. Denise's name as the designated agent, effective immediately, not in case of emergency, not if I become incapacitated, immediately. From the day I signed them, I'd given her legal access to everything, and I'd done it willingly, because I trusted her, because she was my daughter. I sat on the guest bed, Margaret's side of the house, the room she'd used when the chemo made her too sick to sleep through the night, and read through those documents. All the legal language that basically said Denise could do whatever she wanted with my money, withdraw it, transfer it, spend it, all perfectly legal as long as she had that signed paper. She'd planned this. 5 years ago, she'd already been planning it, or maybe longer. Maybe she'd been waiting for the right moment, waiting for Mom to die so I'd be vulnerable, waiting for my eyesight to fail so I wouldn't notice, waiting for a stroke to finish the job of making me helpless. And the whole time, she'd been playing the role of the caring daughter, bringing groceries, checking in with phone calls, showing up after the stroke, sleeping in my guest room, managing my medications, driving me to appointments, all while robbing me blind. I thought about the way she'd held my hand in the hospital, the way she'd said, "I love you, Dad," before she left each night, the way she'd made my favorite soup, Margaret's recipe, during the first week of recovery. All of its performance, all of it lies wrapped around theft. I sat there for a long time, the documents in my lap, the morning turning into afternoon, and felt something harden in my chest. Not anger exactly, not yet. Something colder than anger. Resolve, maybe. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting, and walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, stared at it for a moment. Then I made the call I never thought I'd have to make. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment from wherever you're watching. Tell me what city, what state, what country. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Because right now, in my kitchen, with my daughter's theft documented in black and white, I've never felt more isolated in my life. The phone rang twice before someone answered, and everything that came after started with that one conversation. When I asked where my money went, my daughter asked if I was confused, like I was the criminal. I dialed her number with shaking hands. 3 rings, 4. Part of me hoped she wouldn't answer, that I could postpone this moment, pretend for another hour that maybe there was some explanation I hadn't considered. "Hey, Dad." Her voice was bright, warm, the same voice that had read me bedtime stories when she was 7. "How are you feeling today? Where's my money?" The words came out harder than I intended. Silence, just for a beat. Then, "Dad, what are you talking about?" "My bank account, Denise. $320,000. Where is it?" "Dad." Her tone shifted, softer now, concerned. The nurse's voice. "Are you feeling okay? Did you take your morning medication? Sometimes the stroke can cause confusion, you know that. We talked about this. I'm not confused. Have you been checking your blood pressure? Stress can affect cognitive function, especially this soon after." "Denise, I cut her off. I'm looking at 5 years of bank statements, wire transfers, ATM withdrawals, your name on the authorizations. I want to know where my money went. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, the concern was thicker, almost patronizing. Dad, those withdrawals were for your care, your medications, the medical equipment, the home health aid. Remember? We discussed all of this. You approved everything. I never approved $25,000 wire transfers. Yes, you did. For the stair lift we were going to install, and the bathroom modifications. You were very clear that you wanted to stay in the house, so we made plans. I don't have a stair lift. Because you changed your mind, remember? You said you didn't need it anymore. Dad, I'm worried about you. Is this the stroke causing memory issues? Maybe we should call Dr. Patterson. Have him run some cognitive tests. She kept talking, keep using medical terms, kept implying that my brain was broken, that I was the one who couldn't be trusted. And for just a moment, just a flash, I felt doubt creep in. What if she was right? What if the stroke had damaged something? What if I was remembering wrong, seeing patterns that weren't there, accusing my own daughter of something she didn't do? Then I looked down at my notebook, at the line that said, ATM withdrawal, Miami, Florida, $500. Date, 2 months ago. Denise, I said quietly. When was I in Miami? What? Miami, Florida, 2 months ago. When was I there? Silence. Because there's an ATM withdrawal from my account in Miami, and I haven't been to Florida in 15 years. Dad, there must be some mistake. Maybe fraud. We should report it. Your name is on the authorization. I don't know what you're talking about. Erie, Harrisburg, State College, Cleveland. When did I go to any of those places? Dad, please. You're not thinking clearly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. After the stroke, sometimes people become paranoid, suspicious of family members. It's a documented condition. Let me come over. We'll go through everything together. I'll show you all the receipts, all the documentation. Don't come over. Dad, I said don't come over. I'm handling this. Handling what? Dad, you're scaring me. If you're having a mental health crisis, I hung up, sat there staring at my phone. My hand was shaking again, but not from the stroke, from rage, from the realization that she'd just tried to use my own health crisis, my vulnerability, my fear of losing my mind, to make me doubt reality. She hadn't denied anything, not really. She'd just tried to make me believe I couldn't trust myself. I stood up, put on my jacket, grabbed my car keys and the folder with all the bank statements. I was going to the bank in person, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone tell me I was confused. Patricia didn't ask if I was confused. She asked if I wanted to press charges. First National Bank sits on Fifth Avenue, the same brick building where I opened my first account in 1989, back when Margaret and I were still optimistic about retirement, still planning trips we thought we'd take someday. I walked in at 10:15. The lobby was quiet. A young couple at one desk, discussing a mortgage probably. An older woman at the teller window, depositing a check. I need to see Patricia Chen, I told the receptionist. Do you have an appointment, sir? Tell her it's Stan Kowalski. She'll want to see me. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Patricia's office. She's been the branch manager for 12 years, knows most of her customers by name, remembers details about their lives. Professional, but human, the kind of banker you trust. Stan. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. What can I do for you? I set the folder down. I opened it, started explaining. My voice broke twice. Once when I mentioned Margaret's insurance money, once when I said Denise's name. Patricia's expression shifted as I talked, from polite concern to something harder, something that looked like anger, but professional, controlled. How much total? She asked when I finished. Around $320,000. She didn't flinch, just nodded and turned to her computer. Give me a moment. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, fast, purposeful. She pulled up screens, scrolled through data, clicked and typed and pulled up more screens. 10 minutes passed. 15. I'm printing everything, she said without looking away from the monitor. Transaction logs, wire transfer receipts, check images, online banking login records with IP addresses, Authorization documents, all of it. The printer in the corner started humming, page after page. "Stan," Patricia said, still typing, "I'm going to be very direct with you. Several of these transactions should have triggered fraud alerts. Large withdrawals, unusual activity patterns, out-of-state ATM usage. But because Denise was listed as having power of attorney, the system treated her access as legitimate. She had legal authority, so the safeguards didn't apply. So the bank just let her. The bank followed the procedure based on the documentation you signed." She finally looked at me. "Which means what happened to you was legal from the bank's perspective, but that doesn't mean it was right, and it doesn't mean you don't have options." She collected the printed pages, started organizing them chronologically, adding sticky notes to mark significant transactions. Her movements were precise, methodical. "There's a detective I know," she said. "Financial Crimes Unit. She specializes in elder abuse cases. And there's an attorney, Mark Davidson, elder law. He's good. He's helped other clients in similar situations." Similar situations. I repeated the words. "This happens a lot?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "More than you'd think. Adult children with power of attorney, aging parents who trust them. The children start small, convince themselves they're borrowing, that they'll pay it back. Then it escalates. By the time the parent realizes what's happening, years of theft have occurred." She handed me the organized stack. Had to be 3 inches thick. "This is your documentation," she said. "Everything the bank has. You'll need it for the police report. And for your attorney. Stan, I want you to know, what happened to you was not your fault. You trusted your daughter. That's what parents do." I took the stack. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel. "Do you want to press charges?" Patricia asked. "Not if I thought I should. Not if I was sure. Just, do you want to?" I looked at the documentation. 5 years of betrayal, organized with color-coded tabs. "Yes," I said. Patricia nodded, picked up her phone, started dialing. "Then let's make sure she faces consequences. The attorney said this would destroy my relationship with my daughter." I told him she'd already destroyed me. Mark Davidson's office was in a converted townhouse in Shadyside. Old hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, the kind of place that felt established, solid, like the law should feel. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, but his handshake was firm, and his eyes didn't do that thing some people's eyes do when they meet an elderly man, that subtle shift into talking to a child mode. "Patricia Chen speaks highly of you," he said, settling into the chair behind his desk. "And she doesn't speak highly of people lightly. Tell me what happened." I told him. Everything. The stroke, the discovery, the phone call, the bank records. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Mr. Kowalski, I specialize in financial abuse cases. Elder law. I've seen this exact pattern more times than I can count. Adult children with power of attorney, systematically draining their parents' accounts. Sometimes it's desperation. Sometimes it's entitlement. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to meet a weak character. Which one was my daughter? Does it matter?" I thought about that. "No, I guess it doesn't." Mark opened the folder I'd brought and began reviewing Patricia's documentation. He moved through it quickly, professionally, occasionally making notes. "This is clear-cut," he said after several minutes. "Pennsylvania law treats financial exploitation of someone over 60 as a serious felony. Enhanced penalties. Your documentation is excellent. Bank cooperation, paper trail, and you're a sympathetic victim, elderly, post-stroke. Trusted your daughter to protect you, not rob you. What happens next? We take 3 immediate steps. First, we formally revoke her power of attorney. I'll draft the documents today. Second, you file a criminal complaint with the police. I can connect you with Detective Sarah Miller. She's excellent with these cases. Third, we file a civil suit for recovery of the stolen funds, plus damages. The criminal charges put pressure on her to settle the civil case. How much can I get back? With this level of documentation? Most of it, maybe all of it. Depends on whether she still has assets, or if she spent everything. Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mr. Kowalski, I need you to understand something. If we pursue this, criminal charges and civil suit, your relationship with your daughter is over, permanently. No reconciliation, no future family gatherings. She'll likely go to prison. Her nursing license will be revoked. Her career will be destroyed. This isn't something you can undo once we start." I looked at him. This man I'd met 30 minutes ago. This stranger who was giving me the chance to turn back, to choose peace over justice, to forgive in the name of family. "She already destroyed our relationship," I said quietly. "She did that 5 years ago when she started stealing from me. I just didn't know it yet. I was living in a lie, thinking my daughter loved me, when really she was counting down the days until I died, so she could have whatever was left." Mark nodded. "Then, let's get your money back, and let's make sure she faces consequences." He started drafting documents before I left his office. I signed away her power with the same pen she'd used to forge my signature. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Mark's template and a blank sheet of paper. He'd told me the legal language was already handled, the formal revocation document that would go to the bank, to Denise, to the courts. But I wanted to write it myself first. Needed to. I started by hand, the way I used to write production reports at the mill. Pen on paper, words that mattered, to whom it may concern. I, Stanley Joseph Kowalski, being of sound mind and full mental capacity, hereby revoke all powers of attorney previously granted to Denise Marie Kowalski, effective immediately. Sound mind, full mental capacity. I made sure those words were clear, because she tried to convince me, tried to convince herself that I wasn't, that my brain was broken, that I couldn't be trusted. I kept writing, listed specific transactions, dates, amounts, the wire transfer on April 12th for $25,000, the forged check on June 3rd for $6,800, the ATM withdrawals in Erie, Pennsylvania, while I was home in Pittsburgh watching the Steelers game. The pen moved across the page, and something about the physical act of writing, the scratch of ink, the pressure of forming each letter, felt like I was taking back control, taking back myself. I wrote about the power of attorney I'd signed 5 years ago, how Denise had said it was just in case, how I'd trusted her because she was my daughter, because she was a medical professional, because parents are supposed to trust their children with everything, including their future vulnerability. I gave her this power to protect me if something happened. She used it to rob me while I was still alive and aware. That line made me stop, set the pen down, stare at the words, still alive and aware. That was the worst part, wasn't it? She hadn't waited for me to be incapacitated, hadn't waited for dementia or another stroke or anything that would have made me unaware of what was happening. She'd stolen from me while I could still feel the betrayal, while I could still understand what she'd done. I finished the handwritten version. Then I typed it on my laptop, following Mark's template exactly. Legal language, formal structure, copies to be sent to First National Bank, to Denise's address, to Mark's office for his records. The next morning, I drove to the Notary Public on Murray Avenue. She stamped it, signed it, and added the official seal. Then I went to the post office, sent 3 copies, all certified mail, all requiring signatures. The clerk handed me the receipts, tracking numbers, proof of delivery. "Important documents?" she asked. "Very," I said. I walked back to my car, the receipts in my pocket, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not yet, but certainty, the kind that comes from knowing you've done everything right, everything you're supposed to do, and now the wheels of justice are turning whether anyone wants them to or not. Denise would receive her letter on Thursday, and then she'd know what it felt like to have your world collapse in an afternoon. My daughter spent 5 years stealing with confidence. It took her 5 minutes to realize she was caught. I wasn't there when Denise received the letter. Didn't see her face when she opened the certified mail envelope, pulled out the revocation document, and saw the copies sent to the bank and Mark Davidson's office. But Mark told me what happened next, and Detective Miller filled in the rest. Denise opened it Thursday afternoon at her townhouse in Ross Township, read it standing in her kitchen. Then I immediately called my cell phone. I didn't answer. She called again, 3 times in 5 minutes. I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, she was in her car, driving to my house. I wasn't home. I was at Mark's office, going over the criminal complaint. She knocked, rang the doorbell, looked through the front window. My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, no relation, different spelling, but we've joked about it for years, told me later that Denise stood on my porch for 10 minutes, trying to see inside, before finally leaving. Then Denise called First National Bank, asked for Patricia Chen. Patricia told me about that conversation, said Denise's voice was shaking, trying to sound professional but cracking around the edges. I need to discuss my father's account, Denise had said. There's been some confusion. Ms. Kowalski, Patricia interrupted. I'm aware of the situation. Your father has filed a fraud report. Your access to his accounts has been permanently terminated. If you have questions, you'll need to speak with your attorney. But I'm his power of attorney. Not anymore. That authority was revoked yesterday. I received the notarized documents this morning. Patricia said. Denise went quiet. Then, there's been a misunderstanding. My father is confused. The stroke affected his memory. Ms. Kowalski, I've known your father for 15 years. I met with him personally. He's very clear about what happened, and our records support his account completely. As I said, if you have questions, speak with your attorney. Patricia hung up. Denise sat in her car outside the bank for 20 minutes after that, just sitting there. Mark's investigator told me later, staring at nothing. She was calculating, trying to figure out if there was a way out, some explanation she could construct, some narrative that would make this go away. She considered claiming the money was loans, that I'd given her permission verbally, that we'd had agreements she could prove somehow. But she knew the evidence was documented. Wire transfers with her name, ATM withdrawals in cities I'd never visited, forged checks, 5 years of systematic theft, all recorded, all time-stamped, all printed out in 3-inch stacks with bank stamps and authorization codes. There was no story she could tell that would erase that. By Friday morning, Denise had called a criminal defense attorney, Robert Harrigan, according to court documents I saw later. Expensive, good reputation, the kind of lawyer you hire when you're guilty, and you know it. She met with him Friday afternoon, explained everything, or her version of everything, asked what she was facing. Harrigan was honest with her, Mark told me later. Multiple felonies, enhanced penalties for elder victims, prison time, possible loss of her nursing license. Denise asked how much prison time. Years, Harrigan said. Not months. Years. That's when she started crying. But by then, Detective Sarah Miller was already reviewing my case file, and the wheels were turning. The detective told me I did everything right. I felt like I'd done everything wrong for 5 years. Detective Sarah Miller worked out of the Pittsburgh Police Financial Crimes Unit, 28 years on the force, specialized in fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. She'd seen elder abuse cases escalate in recent years, adult children stealing from aging parents, caregivers draining accounts, scam artists targeting vulnerable seniors. She treated every case like it mattered, like the victims deserved justice, not sympathy and dismissal. Mark Davidson arranged the meeting. Monday morning, police headquarters, a small interview room with a table, 3 chairs, and a recording device mounted on the wall. Detective Miller shook my hand when I walked in, firm grip, direct eye contact. Mr. Kowalski, thank you for coming in. I know this isn't easy. She had Patricia's documentation already spread across the table, the 3-inch stack of bank records, organized with colored tabs. She'd been reviewing it before I arrived. I want to start by saying I'm sorry this happened to you, Miller said, settling into her chair. Financial abuse of elderly victims is one of the most underreported crimes in the country. A lot of people never come forward because they're embarrassed, or because it's family, or because they think no one will believe them. The fact that you're here tells me you're taking this seriously, and so am I. She clicked on the recording device, stated the date, time, case number, people present. Then she asked me to tell her everything, from the beginning. I talked for 40 minutes. The stroke, the recovery, checking my bank account, finding the withdrawals, calling Denise, the gaslighting, everything. Miller took notes, occasionally asked clarifying questions, never interrupted unnecessarily. When I finished, she picked up my handwritten ledger, the one I'd made that first morning, tracking 5 years of theft. "This is excellent documentation," she said. "Most victims don't have anything this detailed. You tracked dates, amounts, transaction types. This is evidence-quality work." "I worked production management at the mill," I said. "You learned to track numbers." She smiled slightly. "It shows. Now let me explain what we have here legally." She pulled out a copy of Pennsylvania statutes, started walking me through the charges. Financial exploitation of an older adult. That's when someone in a position of trust uses their access to steal from or defraud someone 60 or older. It's a second-degree felony in Pennsylvania. Up to 10 years imprisonment. She pointed to specific transactions in the bank records. These wire transfers. She transferred money directly to herself while she had power of attorney. That's theft by unlawful taking. Another felony. The forged checks. Forgery. Also a felony. And these ATM withdrawals in cities you never visited? That's access device fraud. She used your card without authorization. Also a felony. How much prison time are we talking about? Depends on the charges the DA files and whether she pleads or goes to trial. But with this level of evidence, multiple felonies, elder victims, systematic theft over 5 years, large dollar amounts, I'd estimate 10 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. I sat back. 10 to 15 years. My daughter, in prison. Mr. Kowalski, I need to ask you directly. Do you want to press charges? Criminal charges, not just civil recovery. Because once we start this process, there's no going back. The DA will prosecute. Your daughter will be arrested. I want to press charges. Miller nodded. Then I'll interview her within 48 hours. I'll present the evidence, give her a chance to explain, and then I'll recommend charges to the district attorney's office. She stood, extended her hand again. You did everything right, Mr. Kowalski. Documentation, bank report, attorney, police report, all the right steps. I shook her hand, but driving home, I kept thinking, if I'd done everything right, how did I let this happen for 5 years? How did I not see it? She cried about her money problems while sitting in handcuffs for stealing mine. Detective Miller called Denise on Tuesday, asked her to come in for an interview. Wednesday, 2 p.m., police headquarters. Denise arrived with her attorney, Robert Harrigan. Mark told me later that she looked exhausted, scared. They sat across from Miller in an interview room, recording device on. Harrigan advised Denise she didn't have to answer any questions, but Miller had evidence to present either way. Miller laid out the bank records, page by page, transaction by transaction. Ms. Kowalski, can you explain these wire transfers? 8 separate transactions totaling $127,000, all transferred to an account in your name. Denise glanced at Harrigan. He nodded slightly. My father agreed to help me with my mortgage, she said. He offered. He wanted to help. Miller pulled out more documents. These transfers occurred while your father was hospitalized after his stroke. He was unconscious for 3 days. Did he make these offers while unconscious? Denise didn't answer. Miller continued. Can you explain these ATM withdrawals? Erie, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, State College. Your father has never been to these cities, but you have. We checked your credit card statements. You were in Erie the same day as this ATM withdrawal. I was managing his money for him. By withdrawing cash for yourself in cities he never visited, he gets confused. The stroke affected his memory. Ms. Kowalski, I met with your father. He's mentally sharp. He documented 5 years of theft in a detailed ledger. He knows exactly what happened, and this evidence supports his account completely. Miller placed check images on the table. These are checks written on your father's account, made out to cash, bearing his signature, except the signature doesn't match his actual signature. Our forensics expert analyzed them. They're forgeries. Harrigan leaned over, whispered something to Denise. Miller waited. Then Denise started crying. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying. The desperate kind. The kind that comes when walls close in and there's nowhere left to run. I had financial problems, she said between sobs. My ex-husband left me with debt, medical school loans, the mortgage. I was drowning. I thought I'd pay it back. I was going to pay it all back. Over 5 years, you never paid back $1. You stole over $300,000 from your elderly father while he trusted you to care for him, while he was recovering from a stroke. Denise put her face in her hands. Harrigan spoke up. Detective, my client is clearly distraught. Your client is under arrest. Miller stood, pulled handcuffs from her belt. Denise Kowalski, you're being charged with financial exploitation of an older adult, theft by unlawful taking, forgery, and access device fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Mark told me later that Denise was still crying when they processed her at the station, still crying about her money problems, while wearing handcuffs for stealing mine. The prosecutor said she could get 20 years. I just wanted my daughter to admit what she'd done. Mark called me Thursday afternoon. The district attorney's office had filed formal charges, 4 counts total. Financial exploitation of an older adult, felony 1, because the theft exceeded $50,000. Theft by unlawful taking, felony 2. Forgery, felony 3, for the forged checks. Access device fraud, felony 3, for the unauthorized ATM withdrawals. Maximum possible sentence if convicted on all counts, 20 years. The DA's office is taking this seriously, Mark said. Elder abuse cases are a priority, and your documentation made their job easy. They have everything they need. What happens now? Denise posted bail yesterday, $50,000. She's out but can't contact you. There's a protection order in place. Her attorney will probably approach the DA about a plea deal. Most defendants do, especially when the evidence is this strong. Going to trial would be suicide. Mark was right. By Friday, Robert Harrigan had requested a meeting with the prosecutor's office. The DA offered a deal. Plead guilty to financial exploitation and theft. Drop the forgery and fraud charges. 4 years in state prison. Full restitution of $320,000 plus interest and penalties. Approximately $375,000 total. Permanent surrender of her nursing license. Mark called to tell me. Harrigan's advising her to take it. He knows if this goes to trial, she'll get 15, maybe 20 years. 4 years is a gift. Does she have to admit what she did? That's part of pleading guilty. She'll have to allocute, stand in front of the judge and describe the crimes. Acknowledge them. Take responsibility. I thought about that. 4 years in prison. My daughter, in prison. Part of me wanted her to face the full 20. I wanted every year to count, every consequence to land. But another part, the tired part, the part that just wanted this to be over, knew I couldn't sit through a trial, couldn't listen to weeks of testimony, couldn't watch her attorney try to paint me as confused or vindictive, couldn't face that prolonged battle. Tell the DA I support the plea deal, I said. I just want her to admit what she did, out loud, in court. I want it on the record. She will. Plea hearings require full allocution. She'll have to state exactly what she did and why it was wrong. When? 6 weeks. They need to schedule with the judge, process the paperwork. But it's happening, Stan. She's going to prison, and you're going to get your money back. I hung up, sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd first discovered the theft, where I'd made that first phone call to Denise, where everything changed. 6 weeks until I'd sit in a courtroom and hear my daughter admit she'd destroyed me. 6 weeks until whatever came next. The judge asked my daughter if she stole from me, and for the first time in 5 years, she told the truth. Allegheny County Courthouse, 3rd floor, courtroom C. 6 weeks after the charges were filed, and I was sitting in the front row on the prosecution's side, hands folded in my lap, watching my daughter stand before a judge. Judge Richard Brennan, late 60s himself, been on the bench for 20 years, Mark told me. Saw a lot of cases, didn't suffer fools, treated elder abuse with the seriousness it deserved. Denise stood beside her attorney, Robert Harrigan. She wore a gray suit, professional, her hair pulled back. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, like the weight of what she'd done had physically diminished her. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. The prosecutor, Assistant DA Jennifer Walsh, stood at her table and addressed the court. Your Honor, the Commonwealth has reached a plea agreement with the defendant in the matter of Commonwealth versus Denise Marie Kowalski. She read the charges: financial exploitation of an older adult, theft by unlawful taking, 4 counts total, reduced from the original 7. Then she read the agreement: 4 years in state prison, full restitution of $320,000 plus interest and fees, $367,000 total, permanent surrender of nursing license, 10 years probation upon release. Judge Brennan looked at Denise. Ms. Kowalski, do you understand the charges against you? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was quiet, barely audible. And do you understand that by pleading guilty, you're waiving your right to a trial? Yes, Your Honor. Has anyone forced you to enter this plea? Are you doing this of your own free will? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Brennan leaned forward slightly. Ms. Kowalski, I need you to tell the court, in your own words, what you did. Did you steal money from your father, Stanley Kowalski? Silence. Just for a moment. Denise glanced at her attorney. He nodded. She looked at the judge. Not at me. Couldn't look at me. Yes, Your Honor. How much did you steal? Approximately $320,000 over 5 years. And how did you do this? I had a power of attorney. I used it to make wire transfers, withdrawals, and write checks without his knowledge or permission. Did your father authorize these transactions? No, Your Honor. Did you intend to pay him back? Another pause. Longer this time. Then quietly. No, Your Honor. That answer hit harder than I expected, because part of me, some small, desperate part, had wanted to believe she'd intended to return it, that somewhere in her mind there'd been a plan for restitution, even if she never followed through. But no, she'd never intended to pay me back. She'd just intended to take until there was nothing left to take. Judge Brennan nodded. Do you understand that you'll serve 4 years in state prison for these crimes? Yes, Your Honor. And that you'll surrender your nursing license permanently? Yes, Your Honor. The judge made a note on his paperwork. Then he looked up. Before I formally accept this plea, I'd like to hear from the victim. Mr. Kowalski, would you like to make a statement? I hadn't planned what to say. Mark had asked if I wanted to prepare something, read from notes. I'd told him no. If I couldn't speak from the heart about my own daughter's betrayal, then what was the point? I stood, walked to the microphone at the front of the courtroom. My legs felt stiff. My hands found the edges of the podium, gripped it. And I looked at my daughter for the first time since she'd walked into that courtroom. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. I told the judge I didn't lose money. I lost my daughter, and no court could give her back. Your Honor, I began. My voice sounded steady, stronger than I felt. I worked at the steel mills here in Pittsburgh for 40 years. Jones and Laughlin, then LTV when they took over. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week. Overtime whenever they offered it, because my wife Margaret and I had plans. We were going to travel when I retired. See the country. Maybe go to Ireland, where her grandmother came from. I glanced at Denise. She was staring at the floor. Every extra shift I took was for our future. Every vacation we postponed. Every restaurant dinner we skipped to save money. It was all for retirement, for security, for the life we'd earned after decades of hard work. My hands tightened on the podium. Margaret died 3 years ago. Cancer. It happened fast, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. And when she was gone, I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to live in a house that felt too big and too quiet. My daughter Denise helped me through that time. Or I thought she did. She'd come over, bring groceries, and sit with me. She told me, "Dad, I'll take care of everything. You just focus on healing." I paused, breathed. What I didn't know was that taking care of everything meant robbing me blind while I grieved. She waited until I was at my weakest, until my wife was dead and I was barely holding myself together, and she increased her theft. Took more, took faster. I used my pain as an opportunity. Judge Brennan was listening intently. So was everyone else in that courtroom. Then I had a stroke. Mild one, they said. Lucky. And again, Denise was there, stayed at my house, managed my medications, drove me to appointments, told me she loved me, and the whole time, she was draining what was left of my savings. I finally looked directly at Denise. I made it myself. I didn't lose $320,000, Your Honor. I mean, I did, but that's not what hurts. What hurts is I lost my daughter, the person I thought I knew, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world after Margaret died. That person never existed, or maybe she did once, and I don't know when she stopped being that person, but she's gone now, and no court can give her back to me. My voice cracked slightly. I steadied it. I don't have grandchildren. Denise never had kids, so there won't be any phone calls now, no holiday visits, no future at all with her, just silence in the memory of who I thought she was. I looked back at the judge. The money can be repaid. Numbers in an account can be restored. But trust? That can't be repaired. She stole my future, my security, my peace of mind. She made me doubt my own sanity when I confronted her. She exploited my stroke, my grief, my declining eyesight. Every vulnerability I had, she used against me. I was almost finished. Just one more thing to say. Your Honor, I hope prison teaches her something I couldn't. I tried to raise her right, tried to teach her about honesty, about family, about taking care of people instead of using them. I failed somewhere. Maybe as a father, I failed. But I hope these 4 years give her time to think about who she became and why. That's all I can hope for now. I stepped back from the microphone. I walked back to my seat, sat down, and waited for the judge to finish what I'd started. The judge called it theft plus cruelty. I called it the day I stopped being a father. Judge Brennan sat quietly for a moment after I returned to my seat. Then he looked at Denise. Ms. Kowalski, I've reviewed your case thoroughly. I've read the police reports, the bank records, your father's statements, and the plea agreement. I want you to understand something before I accept this plea and impose sentence. Denise stood very still, her attorney beside her. What you did wasn't just theft, the judge continued. Theft is taking someone's property without permission. What you did was theft plus cruelty. You didn't steal from a stranger. You stole from your father, a man who trusted you completely, who gave you legal authority over his finances because he believed you would protect him. Instead, you systematically robbed him for 5 years. The judge's voice was measured, controlled, but there was steel underneath. You are a nurse practitioner, a medical professional, someone trained to care for vulnerable populations. Your father, at 73 years old, recovering from a stroke, dealing with declining eyesight, he was exactly the kind of vulnerable adult you were trained to protect. Instead, you exploited every vulnerability he had. Denise's shoulders were shaking, crying again, probably. Elder financial abuse is not a victimless crime. It's not just numbers in an account. It's stealing someone's security in their final years. It's stealing their dignity, their independence, their peace of mind. Your father worked 40 years for that money. 40 years of labor, sacrifice, delayed gratification, and you took it while pretending to care for him. Judge Brennan picked up the plea agreement. I'm accepting this plea because it includes substantial consequences and because your father supports this resolution. But understand, Ms. Kowalski, if you had rejected this plea and gone to trial, I would have sentenced you to the maximum allowable under law. He read the formal sentence. 4 years in the State Correctional Institution at Muncie. Restitution of $320,000 plus $47,000 in interest, fees, and court costs. $367,000 total, payable upon release according to a schedule to be determined by probation. Permanent and irrevocable surrender of nursing license. 10 years of probation following release, during which any similar offense would result in immediate re-imprisonment. Bailiff, please take Ms. Kowalski into custody. The bailiff approached, pulled Denise's hands behind her back. Handcuffs clicked into place. Harrigan whispered something to her. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. They led her toward the side door, the door that led to processing, to county jail, to the transport that would take her to Muncie. I watched her go. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, No anger, no relief, just emptiness where a daughter used to be. The door closed behind her with a heavy metallic sound, and I was alone in a courtroom, having just watched my only child sentenced to prison. The judge was saying something else, some procedural matters. I wasn't really listening. I stood when everyone else stood, walked out when it was time to walk out. I sat in my car, remembering who she used to be, or who I thought she was. Patricia had offered to come to the hearing. So had Mark. I'd told them both no. This was something I needed to face alone. Outside the courthouse, October sun was bright and cold, the kind of day Margaret used to love. Sweater weather, she'd called it. I walked to the parking garage, found my car on the 3rd level, got in, sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, engine off. I thought about Denise at 7 years old, losing her first tooth. At 17, graduating high school, her mother cried with pride. At 25, the day she earned her nursing license, hugging me and saying, "I did it. Dad, when did she change? Or had she always been capable of this, and I'd been too blind to see it? Too trusting? Too much of a fool?" I didn't have answers. Maybe there weren't any. I started the car, drove home through afternoon traffic, pulled into my driveway, walked into my house. It was quiet, would stay quiet. No daughter's voice calling to say she'd stop by. No future grandchildren I'd never have. Just me and silence and the television I'd turn on to fill the emptiness. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and began figuring out how to live with what remained. I got back 2/3 of my money, but money was never really what I lost. The restitution process took 6 months. Mark Davidson handled most of it, but I stayed involved. I wanted to see every step, needed to understand where my money was going to come from, since Denise wasn't exactly earning a salary in prison. First, her townhouse in Ross Township. She'd bought it 3 years ago, probably with my money, though proving exactly which dollars went where was impossible. The court ordered it sold to satisfy part of the restitution judgment. After the mortgage was paid off and the real estate fees deducted, the equity came to $89,000. That went directly into an escrow account Mark set up, then her retirement account. She'd worked as a nurse practitioner for 12 years, contributing to a 403B plan through the hospital system. The court seized it. After early withdrawal penalties and taxes, it yielded $43,000 into the escrow account. The bank's fraud insurance came through next. Patricia at First National had filed a claim on my behalf, arguing that several transactions should have triggered alerts regardless of Denise's power of attorney status. The insurance company investigated for 3 months, then paid out $75,000. Mark said we were lucky. Most victims don't get anything from bank insurance. That brought the total to $207,000. Not the full $320,000 she'd stolen, but more than half. Mark filed civil liens against any future income Denise might earn after her release. Wages, tax refunds, lottery winnings. Anything that came to her would be garnished until the remaining balance was paid. Those lines were good for 20 years. The court-ordered interest and fees added another $24,000 to what she'd already paid back, bringing my recovered total to $231,000. 70%. That's what I got back. Not everything, but enough. Enough to restore my security. Enough that I wouldn't spend my final years worrying about every expense. Enough that Margaret's insurance money, what was left of it, could still serve the purpose we'd intended, keeping me safe and independent. Mark deposited everything into a new account, not at First National. Patricia understood when I told her I needed a fresh start, a different bank, different statements, different login credentials that no one but me would ever know. I set up the account with additional security measures, 2-factor authentication, transaction alerts for anything over $500, no authorized users, no power of attorney, no one but me. "Stan," Mark said when we finished the paperwork, "you did everything right. Most victims never recover this much. And the criminal conviction, that's rare. You should be proud. Proud." I thought about that word driving home. I'd recovered most of my money, put my daughter in prison, protected myself from future theft, built a legal fortress around my finances, but I still came home to an empty house, still had no daughter to call, still woke up some mornings forgetting what had happened, reaching for my phone to tell Denise something funny before remembering. The money was back, the security was restored, but what I'd actually lost couldn't be recovered through court orders and escrow accounts, and no attorney, no matter how skilled, could file a motion to get that back. I learned you don't get over betrayal. You just build a life around the hole it leaves. My life found new rhythms, different ones, not better or worse than before, just adjusted to the reality of who I was now, a father without a daughter, a man who'd learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Tuesday mornings, I still met the guys at Mitchell's Diner on Carson Street, same booth we'd claimed for 15 years. Joe, Frank, Tommy, Bill, all retired from the mills, all dealing with their own versions of aging and loss. They knew what happened with Denise. I'd told them once, shortly after the sentencing, and they'd nodded and said they were sorry, and then never brought it up again. That's how men my age handle pain. We don't interrogate it. We just sit beside each other, drink coffee, argue about the Steelers, and let presence do the work that words can't. I volunteered twice a week at the Veterans Hall on Liberty Avenue, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, helped run bingo nights, worked the fish fries during Lent, set up chairs for community meetings. Keeps me busy, kept me connected to people who didn't know my story, didn't ask questions, just appreciated an extra pair of hands. Every Sunday morning, I reviewed my bank accounts, checked every transaction, made sure the balances matched my records. Some people might call it paranoia. I called it due diligence. I'd trusted once without verifying. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I changed my will. Everything goes to my sister Helen's grandchildren now. 3 kids, Emma, Jack, and Sophie. Good kids. I see them maybe 3 times a year, and they don't expect anything from me, which somehow makes me want to leave them everything. Denise's name isn't mentioned in the document. She's simply absent, like she never existed. People at the diner, at the Veterans Hall, at church, they'd ask sometimes, "How's your daughter? Is she still nursing?" Early on, I'd stumble through explanations. Now I just say, "We don't have contact anymore," and most people understand enough not to push. I don't date, don't pursue companionship. A few well-meaning friends tried to set me up with widows they knew, women in similar situations, maybe looking for someone to share the quiet years with. I declined politely. Trust is too hard now. The idea of letting someone into my life, into my finances, into my daily routine, I can't do it. Maybe that makes me broken. Maybe that's just realistic. The grief never left. I thought it would at first. Thought time would heal. Closure would come. Forgiveness might eventually soften the edges. But grief doesn't work that way. At least not this kind. I learned to coexist with it instead. It's there when I wake up, there when I go to sleep, there when I see fathers and daughters in the grocery store, when I hear someone mention their kids, when holidays approach, and I realize I'll spend them alone. You don't get over betrayal. You don't heal from it like a broken bone that knits back stronger. You just build a life around the hole it leaves and learn to walk without falling in. Her letter said she was sorry, but sorry doesn't unwrite 5 years of lies. It arrived on a Tuesday, 14 months after her sentencing. Plain white envelope, institutional return address, SCI Muncie, Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. I stared at it for 5 minutes before opening it. 2 pages, handwritten, her familiar script, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards, grocery lists stuck to my refrigerator, notes left on the counter when she'd visit. Dear Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away without opening it, but my therapist here says I should try to communicate, to take responsibility, to at least attempt to explain. She wrote about prison programs, addiction counseling. She claimed she'd been addicted to spending, using shopping to fill some emptiness she couldn't name. Cognitive behavioral therapy, financial literacy classes that taught her what she should have learned years ago. She wrote about facing what she'd done, how therapy forced her to acknowledge that she'd rationalized every theft, convinced herself it wasn't really stealing because Dad would want to help me if he knew, until the lies became a system, and the system became her life. I understand if you can't forgive me, she wrote near the end. I don't forgive myself, but I hope someday we can talk. Not now. I know it's too soon, but someday, maybe. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for the gaslighting I'd learned to recognize, for the subtle blame shifting, the excuses disguised as explanations. I didn't find any, just words, sincere-sounding words that might be genuine remorse or might be another performance. But even if they were genuine, they didn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't unwrite 5 years of lies, doesn't restore trust. Don't give me back the daughter I thought I knew. I folded the letter, put it in my desk drawer, didn't throw it away, didn't answer it either. Maybe someday, but not today. At the mill, we earned trust by proving ourselves every day. I learned too late that blood isn't proof. November evening, cold enough that I needed my heavy jacket on the porch. I sat in the chair Margaret used to love, watching the street lights flicker on as the sun went down, thinking about trust. 40 years at the steel mills, 40 years working around machinery that could kill you in a heartbeat if someone made a mistake. The cranes lift tons of molten metal overhead. The furnaces are hot enough to melt bone. The production lines where one man's carelessness could cost another man his life. We trusted each other in that environment. Had to. But that trust wasn't automatic. It wasn't given because you wore the same uniform or worked for the same company. It was earned. Every single day. You earned it by showing up on time, by following procedures exactly, by checking your equipment before every shift, by watching out for the guy next to you, making sure he wasn't about to do something stupid or dangerous, by proving, through months and years of consistent reliability, that you could be trusted with someone else's safety. And if you betrayed that trust, if you cut corners, skipped inspections, ignored protocols, you were gone, not just fired, blacklisted. Because in an environment where lives depend on trust, betrayal doesn't get second chances. I gave Denise trust I never made her earn, gave it to her automatically just because she was my daughter, because she shared my blood, because society says you're supposed to trust family, supposed to believe that DNA creates loyalty, but blood isn't proof. Blood is just biology. Trust should be earned through proven reliability, through consistency, through demonstrated character over time. I skipped all that with Denise, handed her power of attorney, access to my finances, control over my medical decisions, and never once asked myself, has she earned this? Has she proven herself trustworthy through her actions, not just through her relationship to me? That was my mistake, not the only one, but the foundational one. Last month, I spoke at the Golden Years Senior Center on 5th Avenue. Patricia had connected me with the director. They wanted someone to talk about financial abuse, warning signs, protection strategies. I told my story, not all of it, just enough. The power of attorney, the theft, the discovery, the consequences. Afterward, 3 people came up to me, 2 women and a man, all in their 70s. They'd experienced similar situations, children, nieces, nephews, helpful neighbors who'd stolen from them. They'd been too ashamed to report it, too embarrassed, too afraid of family judgment. I told them what I told myself. Shame belongs to the thief, not the victim. One of the women filed a police report the next week. Patricia called to tell me, that's something, not redemption, not healing, just one person's suffering preventing another's. My story might save someone else from signing away trust to someone who hasn't earned it. And in the quiet house, on cold November evenings, that has to be enough. If my story sounds familiar, or if you're watching from somewhere dealing with something similar, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, what time it is there. Sometimes, just knowing someone else understands makes the quiet house a little less quiet. And if this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. I've got more to say about trust, consequences, and what life teaches when you're paying attention. The streetlights are fully on now, the neighborhood settling into evening. I'll go inside soon. make dinner, watch the news, go to bed, and tomorrow I'll wake up and do it all again. Because that's what you do. You survive, you adapt, you build a life around the loss, and if you're lucky, you turn the pain into something that might help someone else. At the mill, we proved ourselves every day. I'm still proving myself now, just in different ways.